and welcome back to the Worcester Senior Center Stay Connected programming on Channel 192. My name is Suki Lapin, and I am the program coordinator at the Worcester Senior Center. I am pleased to introduce Dr. Martha Gatch, Education Manager and Conservation Coordinator at Mass Audubon Broad Meadow Brook Wildlife Sanctuary and Conservation Center. Today, our program is titled Listening to the Birds. Spring is filled with joyous birdsong. Learn how and why birds sing. Learn tips on how to listen to birds to enjoy nature's symphony. Welcome, Dr. Gatch.
Thank you very much, Suki. And it's a pleasure to be with everybody and a pleasure to share with you what I know about birdsong. It is a wonderful time, any time of year, to listen to birdsong. But if you're listening to this in spring, it's an especially fun time because we have a lot of birds that are singing, and we have a lot of new birds that have been spending the winter in faraway places and are returning to our area or moving through our area on their way to their summer nesting places. And they are singing as they go. So it's a lovely time to open your window or step outside and listen to the birds. So I'm going to set up my screen here and get my slideshow going. There we go. Okay. So we are going to spend some time listening to the birds today. And this is a wonderful, wonderful activity for your inner self and also for your brain. This is free music, and the birds are part of our soundscape, our natural soundscape around us that connects us to the world. And it really links us to the players on nature's stage. Birdsong can be a part of your experience of being with the birds or paying attention to the birds. And there are many other ways other than listening to birdsong that you can foster this hobby. There are many books, drawings. You can create your own drawing of the birds, spend some time in observing them and learning them. You can read about them, and then you can study their songs as well. So I wanted to share with you, just to start out, a range of different bird songs so that we can have a sense of the gamut of the music that these creatures are providing us. So at the top, we have the ovenbird. This is a bird of our forest floor that's with us in the summertime. And it's a fairly small bird, but it has a very outside voice, and you can hear it from far away. And it says, teacher, 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 teacher. And then another little bird that is only with us in the high altitude forests, but comes through our area, is the Blackburnian warbler. That's the bird with the gorgeous orange throat and black and white markings. And it has a much higher voice. I call this the ultra supersonic bird. Let's see if I can turn him off. Nope. So our next bird, you might have to turn it down a little bit because he's very loud. It's our solitary vireo, our blue-headed or solitary vireo. And this bird is really talking at us. And this is a bird that is occasionally found in Worcester, but also a little bit to the north. And I wanted to share these images of the solitary vireo with you because these are an example of somebody who is using art to study the birds, learn about the birds, and then just further their own artistic interests. So how do birds communicate? How do they make these amazing sounds? And it really comes down to their anatomy. They have an organ at the base of their windpipe before the two tubes diverge. And this organ is called the syrinx. And if you ever need a good Scrabble word, it's got both a Y and an X in it. And it's composed of cartilage rings and then muscles. Let's see, and you cannot see, let me put my pointer on. There we go. And then muscles around the sides that control the width of those rings as the air is passing through. And because there are two separate tubes and two separate structures of muscles, the birds can actually sing, some of them, duets with themselves, which is what makes the song of the wood thrush so magical. Now, the bird that I have highlighted here today is the Carolina wren, and that shows you where the syrinx is in this bird. And the graph on top is what we call a spectrogram or a sonograph, and it's a depiction of the bird's song. So I think I have the song of this bird in here someplace. There we go. And this bird is repeating the same phrase over and over again. And we put words to that. And some people think that it sounds like tea kettle, tea kettle, tea kettle. Can you hear it? The fancy words for that is echomimetic phrasing. I will not say that word again. That's just for your fun. We think that birds have been able to vocalize for about 66 million years or so. We found a fossil syrinx. It came from Antarctica, from an island in Antarctica, and the bird that it was found in seems to look a lot like a goose. The sounds that we believe this bird can make is honking sounds, like a goose, not true bird song, not yet, that evolved later. But we also know that the syrinx is only found in the lineage of dinosaurs that eventually evolves into birds. So many of our other dinosaurs and the reptiles like alligators that have evolved from this other dinosaur lineage cannot make songs. We think that the way that they vocalized was to do throat booms, where they puff up their throat and then do an internal boom. And we have one bird that does that now, which is ostriches. So if this works, you will hear what an ostrich sounds like. And it isn't working. Let's try this. Suki, was that sound audible? Okay, great, thank you. Perfect. So when you're wondering, if you're wondering what it might have sounded like in the soundscape.
This is the checkers game where grandson and granddad will bond. This is the pool.
If you're wondering what the dinosaur soundscape might have been like, what you would have been hearing would have been all of these booms, some higher, some lower, some bigger, some softer. But that's what dinosaurs could do. But then we have birds. And how do birds learn their songs that are so incredibly complex? Well, it turns out for some of them, it's just instinct. All of the birds in the flycatcher family, for example, are born knowing their own songs. You can take a baby flycatcher out of a nest and put it into the nest of a different flycatcher or a different kind of bird. The parents will raise it. It will sit there and listen to other songs. When it's grown up, it will still sing the song that it was born with. And there's a wonderful story about this. We have two kinds of birds, the alder flycatcher on the left and the willow flycatcher on the right. And when you are outside and you're seeing them, you have no idea which species it is. You're just seeing a little brown bird. And these birds were originally thought to be a single species called the trails flycatcher. But then we started studying their song. And the alder flycatcher says this. Free beer. Free beer. There we go. But then oh, stop that. But then the willow flycatcher says something different. It says Fitzbew. Fitzbew. So that's our willow flycatcher. And when we were studying these songs, we learned that the willow flycatcher, if it hears an alder flycatcher, doesn't respond to it at all, and vice versa. So that tells us that these species are two different birds. These birds are two different species. And when we study where they live and their range, then you can see that the alder flycatcher has a more northern, more eastern distribution than the willow flycatcher, who also has a northern distribution in the summertime, but doesn't get up into Alaska and the northern reaches of Canada. So it's a more southern species, but also spread throughout the United States. So that's a story where our songs, the birds' songs, gave us a clue as to what the birds were really doing, which is kind of fun. Okay. So flycatchers are born knowing their songs, but in most of our other birds, they learn. And how do they do that? Well, it turns out that there is a very small window of time in which birds are able to learn each other's songs or their own songs. And they do that by listening to the other birds singing around them. Not necessarily their dads. They're listening for their neighbors. It's kind of like teenagers. You don't pay attention to your parents, but you'll listen to other adults. And they also seem to listen, they really pay attention when two other adults are singing to each other. If there are two males who are having a song battle, then the young birds are paying more attention to them. So the young birds have mentors or tutors, and they listen and they memorize the song, and then they take that memory and they practice from it. So that they start out with this sub-song up here, which doesn't really sound very much like the song of their species. This is a white-crowned sparrow on this picture. And then they go through a plastic phase, the late summer, where the song is the more and more they practice it, the more and more it starts to sound like a white-crowned sparrow. And then finally, they enter the phase where it's called crystallized song. It's perfect. They're really not going to change it that much. That's what they're going to sing from now on. And it turns out that while most of our birds go through these three stages, and the only time that they can really learn a new song is when they're very young, we do have a few birds that have the ability to learn their songs throughout their lives. For example, canaries. And for another example, starlings. Starlings are amazing mimics. They know how to make the sound of a cell phone or a car alarm or almost any other sound that they are hearing. So especially in urban situations, you might hear birds mimicking human sounds. And starlings have the ability to do that throughout their lives. We also know that there are regional dialects of bird songs. And we have a fun example of that. So just like we have regional dialects, we have a Worcester accent and an accent from folks out in different parts of Boston and other parts of the state and different parts of the country. The birds are doing the same thing. So the sparrows out in California might sound different than the sparrows we have here. And we have a fun example in Massachusetts where our black-capped chickadees, which is our state bird, sound different on the vineyard than they do in the rest of North America. So I am going to play the chickadee song. You might be hearing this now. This is the spring song. And the graph underneath is meant to show you the pitches. So we start off higher and we drop to a lower tone, and there's just 2 notes. And some people say he's saying, see me, see me, see me. But the birds on the vineyard, oh, will you stop that? There we go. No. I can't get it to turn off. I love technology. Okay, so we're also hearing Martha's Vineyard. Da, da, see me. Same pitch. See me. So that's the dialect. Still the same 2 notes, but they're different in the mainland and they're the same on the vineyard. Same pitch. And then you have the question of just how many songs can a bird sing, right? Well, some of our birds are limited to a single song, things like ovenbirds, which I played at the beginning, and then things like indigo buntings, which I have a picture of later on. They're just absolutely beautiful, beautiful birds. Our phoebes have 2 songs, and towhees, which are a large sparrow, which live in fields and grasslands, have 6 songs. And the pattern of delivery of those songs is they like to sing the same song 3, 4, 5, 6 times, and then they'll switch to a second song or a separate song. That's called eventual. But some birds have a whole repertoire of songs, like the mystery bird under the first yellow box, the top yellow box, has an average repertoire of 70 songs. And that bird will switch from one song to the next. So let me play that bird. And that might be familiar to you. Do you hear all the different phrases in there? That's our robin. Early in the morning and then at dusk, they like to sing. Our bird with probably the greatest number of songs is the one in the corner up there, the brown thrasher. That's a bird that's related to mockingbirds and to catbirds, and they're in the mimic family. So they have a lot of songs that they can sing. Birds have songs that they use when they're defending territory or calling to or courting a mate, but they also have calls, which are different vocalizations that they can make for different purposes. And here is the song of an eastern bluebird. Kind of a tuneless, raspy warble. It's always fun to hear in the woods. And then here's the call. Nope, that's still the song. Hang on. There. That's the call. Phoebe. So slightly different, but the same sort of tone to it, I think. So songs versus calls, and we'll get into the differences a little bit. So what are the reasons that birds are out there talking to one another anyway? Well, some of them, the males, have to find a territory and be able to defend that from other birds to ensure that they have enough resources to raise their families, their babies. They're talking to each other because they're courting to either find a mate or to bond with that mate, because some birds mate for several years in a row or for a lifetime, and they always need to strengthen those bonds, much like we do with our partners. Babies use their voices to beg for food, to let the adult know that they're there and they're hungry and you better darn feed me. They also like to just keep in touch with their family members or with members of the group that they're traveling with the flock. And in many cases, that allows them to alert other birds, the same species or just other birds that happen to be around, of the presence of predators. And that's an important function. So defining and defending territory, here's a red-winged blackbird in the marsh. And you can see that this bird has its tail spread and fanned to make it seem larger. It's puffed up, and it also has these beautiful red epaulets on its wings, on its shoulders, that tell everybody else that, hey, I'm here, this is my territory, and I'm going to sing and let you know about it. And then the other birds will talk back to it. Sometimes they will communicate well with family and flocks. They'll let the other birds know that there's food nearby, or that, hey, I'm here with you. And here's a white-breasted nuthatch on a feeder, doing just that. They have this beautiful nasal tone. I always think of America's Got Talent, with some of those very young people who like to sing through their noses when I see this bird. Predator alerts. Our black-capped chickadees are great for letting other birds know that there's somebody who is who doesn't have good motivation nearby. Here's a Cooper's hawk that would love to eat the chickadees. So that's a very different call than what we were listening to before. Dee-dee-dee, dee-dee-dee, dee-dee-dee. It's a scolding call, not the see me, but a scolding call. And the longer it is, the more drawn out, the more dee-dee-dee-dees there are, the stronger the alarm, the more upset the chickadee is. So I'll play it one more time. There you go. That's a chickadee's alarm call. If you hear that, know that you're bothering a bird. Birds sing on an annual cycle. They, like all of us, they have rhythms. In winter, you have the birds that are here year round, and they're singing to each other, not necessarily to court, but just to let each other know that they're there, or maybe they're part of a flock, or maybe there's a food source over here, so come on guys, let's eat. And then towards the late winter, early spring, they start to practice their breeding songs, their courting songs, and I call that the late winter warm-up. In spring, of course, that warm-up gets more and more intense and the real thing, but you also have migration happening. And this is when all the birds that have left New England to go south to Central America or South America, or even just Florida, like many of us, come back up because they're headed up to northern environments to nest and to raise their babies. And some of them are passing through and some of them are staying here, but you get this rush of different species, maybe 3 times the number of different birds that we have year round. And also our resident birds start to nest. So this is a very active time of year for birdsong. You can hear a lot of different kinds of songs, and you hear a lot of song because the birds are singing all the time. Come summertime, birds are busy raising families. Here's a little song sparrow with a mouthful of caterpillars for its babies. And we know that it takes 6,000 to 9,000 caterpillars to raise a family of chickadees. That's a lot of work. So the birds have less time for singing. They're maybe doing a little bit of territory defense, a little bit of communicating among the family, but they're actively gathering food and stuffing their mouths. Occasionally you'll find a bird that's singing through a full mouth of caterpillars, and that's always fun to watch. We also have our juvenile birds, our birds that are growing up and they're listening and they're just starting to practice their songs. They're doing that sub-song. So it's pretty quiet in the middle of the summer. July is not the greatest time to try and go listen to the birds. You'll hear a few, but not too much. And then in fall, we have reverse migration, but we also have a lot of young birds that are practicing their songs as well. So you'll hear a variation of the songs that you're familiar with, but it will sound very much like somebody's warming up. So that's our annual cycle for birdsong. And I want to bring that down to the level of an individual species. And I thought it would be fun to feature the great horned owl. What you're hearing, you heard 2 different pitches. You're hearing a male with the lower pitch and a female with the higher pitched tone. Woo, 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 woo. And they're calling back and forth to each other. They're duetting. Best times to hear owls are, well, 1 o'clock in the morning if you're up. But I was outside the other day at 4:30, 5 o'clock in the morning, and I heard a pair of great horned owls duetting in my neighborhood. So the end of the day, early dusk, and then early dawn are good times to hear owls. So throughout the year, owls are doing different things. And they're always defending their territory, except in late summer, early fall. But from November all the way through July, they will call because they're letting everybody know what their territory is. They're actively courting in the winter. They start in December and then through January, and still courting till about the end of March. They're very early nesters because they're raptors, they're hunters, and those kinds of birds tend to nest early on, our owls and our hawks. So they're building their nest in late January, early February. They're on the nest, laying eggs, incubating the eggs, raising the babies, all the way through to the end of summer. And then every bird has to freshen its feathers at least once, sometimes twice a year. And owls do this in the late summer, early fall, July through October. So they're being very quiet. They're not trying to call attention to themselves because they can't fly as easily. They look a little ragged, and they would rather just fade into the background and do the bare minimum. And then in the fall, they're moving around seasonally, and they are looking for different places, checking out different food reservoirs, resources. The baby birds are dispersing and trying to find their own territory. So even thinking about how an individual bird moves throughout the calendar year, you can think about how it's using its voice. And owls are most vocal during the winter and early spring months. We really don't expect to hear them much during the summer, although there are exceptions. And their voices can change through the season as well. Here again are our black-capped chickadees, and their calls. We have this high-pitched buzzy see, 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 see. Come on. Those are contact calls. They're letting people know, letting other birds know that they're there. And it's kind of a buzzy tone, and it's very high-pitched, and it's quiet, but it sounds quite intense. And then there's spring song, which we've already heard. See me. And again, two chickadees. One's higher, one's lower. And they're having a conversation with one another. If you enjoy migration and you want to know what's coming, one of the places that you can go to is spend some time at Mount Auburn Cemetery, which is a beautiful, very peaceful, very restful spot. And because it is one of the few green places along the coast in Boston, many of our migrating birds see this as an oasis and stop there. So it's famous for the kinds of birds that you can see, especially in May. And they have created this calendar of all these different species that come through in different weeks. And it's like every week there's a new rollout of different birds coming through. In early May, you're going to hear the blue-gray gnatcatchers. Chimney swifts will come back. Say that again. So the second week of May is typically when we start seeing chimney swifts around Worcester. That's a common yellowthroat. Witchetty, witchetty, witchetty. Yellow-billed cuckoos. Which we have heard a lot of the past couple of summers because they eat gypsy moth caterpillars. So that's been the only, I think, advantage of having gypsy moths. And then my favorite, because they're so easy to identify because they say their name, this is another flycatcher, the eastern wood pewee. Pewee. Pew. Pewee. Pew. So spring literally brings a wave of birds. What to listen for with birds? We use different, it's much like music, studying music. You use the same words in the same way. So we have the rhythm, whether a sound is straight or syncopated, has its own rhythm. How high the song is, the chickadee sounds are very high. A mourning dove has a very low pitch. Whether a tone is raspy or clear, the quality of the sound. Whether the song repeats or segments of it repeat, and then the melody, what the bird is actually singing. So here's a clear, sweet tone. And it's really whistled. And when you hear that whistling, you should think, come on, Baltimore Oriole. Isn't that a beautiful song? I love those. Compare that to something that's raspy. That's our goldfinches. Much raspier, less clear of a whistle. So you can listen for patterns and pitches. The mourning dove. Very low, very soft. 1, 2, 3. So a mound of sound followed by 3 hoo, hoo, hoos. Does the sound rise or fall? We know our chickadee sounds. See me, so it's falling. And then the Carolina wren, which I want to play for you. I have to take my pointer off. There we go. You can see in the graphic representation that it covers a wide frequency range. And it's also very regular. It comes right after the other. The wide frequency range gives it that trilling sound. I thought I had a picture. There's our bird. Beautiful little wren with a white eye stripe. So when you're thinking about, when you're studying bird songs and you want to describe them, this one you might have to turn up a little bit for the volume. That's a whistle that goes up and down. Birdie, 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 birdie. And it gets faster and faster. That's our cardinal, male and female. And then the other song that it does, it has a loud whistle that goes up. And very fast, right? So that's a fun one, fairly good to identify. And then we just did this one. Low, mound of song, 2, 3, and then 3 notes on the same pitch. That's our mourning dove. I have one more of these examples. So this one isn't here yet, but it will be. And it has a very dry song, not much flavor to it. It's a trill. It sounds mechanical or almost insect-like. It's on a single pitch. It doesn't vary at all. That's our chipping sparrow. And that will be a fairly common bird that you should expect to encounter this summer. Beautiful little red cap, a white eyebrow, and then a black line through its eye and a clear breast. So if you want to learn birdsong or just experience birdsong, you have to put yourself outside or open a window. They're out there. It's free music. Look around and see if you can find the singer to make the association between what you're hearing and the bird that's singing it. Set yourself some quizzes, like I just did with the slides before we listened to the song, and perhaps you were wondering what kind of bird that was and maybe some different pictures were going through your brain. Try and do that again. And then if you can come up with an image to remember that sound, like with the Carolina wren, I always, the phrase for that is tea kettle, tea kettle, tea kettle, tea. So I always think of a boiling tea kettle when I hear that, and that helps my brain get to, oh yes, that's the Carolina wren. And then you can try and find patterns and rhythm. Is it a slow song? Is it a fast song? Is it repeated? Is it syncopated? Is it a raspy or is it a clear tone? And all of those will help you to learn which bird goes with which song. Some helpful tools that we can recommend. There are many, many, many books that include information on bird songs. There are CDs and there are apps that you can find. I would recommend, I like to use iBird. Merlin is a popular one. Larkwire will give you quizzes for learning songs. And then Song Sleuth and BirdNet are web apps, so that if you have a smartphone and you can record a bird that you're hearing and then you play it for your computer on one of these websites or these apps, it will do a pretty good job of telling you what you're hearing, which can be fun. When you are on the web and looking for good sites, I would recommend the Cornell Labs, Mass Audubon here in Worcester, and then there's another one in Princeton and many other places throughout Massachusetts, is always offering workshops and classes about birds, bird walks. In migration season, I do a weekly bird walk on Friday out of Meadow, Brook, and anybody is welcome to join us. And then there's another fun website for those who might want a little bit more advanced study, which is Zeno Canto, which has recordings of birds from all over the world and is the source of many of the recordings that I've been using today. And then we had this really interesting thing happen this year. Our world shut down, and as horrific as the cause of that was and is, it had an impact on the birds. It got really, really quiet. When people no longer went into the office, highway noise dropped considerably. Background noise dropped considerably. And there were scientists out in California who were able to do a study of this. The graph that you're seeing is a graph of traffic crossing the Golden Gate Bridge in San Francisco in 2020 of last April of 2020. The vehicular traffic equaled that of the vehicular traffic of 1954, before every household had 2 or 3 cars. And what happened is that background noise went away, and the birds no longer had to compete with our human sound. So what did they do? They got quieter. They didn't have to sing as loudly, and they also didn't have to sing as high. So you can think of it as being in a crowded room during a party and everybody's trying to talk to one another, and you notice that your voice is getting louder and it's getting more shrill. Well, when you're in a quiet room, you can talk at your normal conversational level, and that's what the birds were able to do. So the big takeaway for this, for me and all of this, is that we have a lot of noise pollution in our environment, and the birds are dealing with it. It's impacting them. But imagine if we could quiet all the leaf blowers and quiet the honking horns and all of that. What a wonderful thing that would be for our birds. So I wanted to leave you with a little bit of the enthusiasm of the bird world. We have a lovely picture of a marsh wren and a marsh wren on its nest, which it builds in marshes, in the cattails and the reeds. And like our house wrens, which you may be familiar with, marsh wrens are vociferous, enthusiastic little birds, and they contribute to the symphony of the marsh. Let's turn the volume down a little bit here. All of this is happening all around us, and it is up to us to get out and to enjoy it to delve into it as much as we allow ourselves. But the benefits of listening to the birds, I think, is that it heightens your awareness of your environment. It heightens your awareness of the natural soundscape. It connects you to all the different critters that are out there making a living and courting and finding food and raising their babies. It gives you a different language, a new language to be able to interpret what's happening all around us if only we would listen and look. So I wanted to say thank you for allowing me the opportunity to come and speak to you about the wonderful world of birds and birdsong and birding, and to invite you to visit my home place in Worcester, which is Broadmeadow Brook, very close to the Worcester Senior Center. So if you come by for a visit, come and stop in. We have 5 miles of trails and a welcoming visitor center and people who would love to talk to you about the birds. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Gatch. The Worcester Senior Center is once again honored to collaborate with Broadmeadow Brook, Mass Audubon. Stay safe and enjoy listening and looking at the birds.